The soft tap of the rain against the window pane is the only sound that fills the small room. Outside, the world is alive with chaos, a sky torn apart by the violent screech of warplanes overhead. But here, within the confines of this room, a girl, no older than 16, is caught between two worlds. The world outside is burning. Yet in here, all she knows is the steady rhythm of a well-worn task. Her hands are delicate, the fingertips stained with ink from writing letters, from jotting down names, dates, and faces. Her life has never been about warfare, and yet she is surrounded by it. Her name is Eleanor, and for as long as she can remember, she's been trained to remember. Not to fight, not to protest, but to remember. The war, a distant sound that fills the night sky, is something she's been told is not hers to understand, but she's not immune to the darkness it casts across her world. The memory keepers, those entrusted with preserving the lives and stories of the fallen, are the unsung warriors, the invisible protectors who hold the pieces of history no one else wants to see. She looks out the window, her breath fogging the glass, and for a moment, she forgets the rain. She doesn't notice the planes above, the fear that grips the hearts of those in the streets below, or the haunting wail of sirens that sing in the background like a lullaby to the damned. She's lost in thought, thinking of the faces she's seen, the names she's recorded in her quiet notebooks, names that will likely never be remembered. The world outside is fighting, but Eleanor, tucked away in her family's modest home, is too young, too inexperienced to be drafted into the fight. Yet, in some strange way, the war still finds her. The doors of her house have opened to countless strangers, men in uniforms, soldiers in grim-faced silence, who come and go like shadows. They speak of war, of soldiers they've lost, of battles won and lost. And every time they leave behind stories that are quickly forgotten, until Eleanor, who has been trained for this exact moment, remembers. Her father had always said it was important. Don't forget the faces, Eleanor. Don't forget the names. History will need them. He'd say it almost like a prayer, the words etched in his heart as though they held some divine purpose. He was a man obsessed with preserving memories, cataloging them in dusty archives, from the trenches of the Great War to the little-known struggles of a forgotten past. Eleanor, with her sharp eyes and meticulous nature, was his chosen successor. She had never considered it a burden. It was just what she did, what she was meant to do. The idea of a life without these simple, sacred tasks seemed impossible to her. But today, something is different. Today, the sound of the planes doesn't simply rattle the windows. It shakes her core. She doesn't know why, but her sense of duty feels sharper, more pressing. The clock on the wall ticks away, but in the back of her mind, she feels the weight of something far heavier. Her role, the job she's been trained for, was never meant to matter in the context of a war like this. Yet, as she sits, pen in hand, staring out into the stormy sky, something stirs inside her. Maybe it's the thought that the faces she records will soon be erased from memory. Maybe it's the realization that this war, which has been distant for so long, has finally crept into her world. The enemy no longer feels like a shadow. They feel like a presence that's right outside her door. She's supposed to catalog the stories of the dead. She's been doing it for years. But today, it's different. The stories feel more alive. Her role is no longer confined to the past. The weight of history presses against her, and for the first time, she wonders if there's more to memory than just names and faces. What if memory itself becomes a weapon? What if the lives she preserves, the fragments of history she carefully files away, can be used to change the course of this war? She shakes her head, dispelling the thought. It's absurd, isn't it? What could a girl like her, with nothing but a notebook and a sharp mind, possibly do against something so enormous? But even as she tries to dismiss it, something gnaws at her. Her father's voice echoes in her ears. History will need them. Maybe, just maybe, it isn't just about the dead. Maybe it's about saving the living. And maybe, just maybe, there's more power in remembering than anyone has ever realized. That afternoon, Eleanor's routine continues. She sits in her quiet room, writing the names of soldiers who have died in the fighting. She writes down the places, small villages in Europe, tiny outposts in the Middle East, marking them with dates and brief, almost impersonal descriptions. But as the hours pass, something about the names on the page begins to feel off. It's not that they're wrong, but that they're incomplete. They're not just names, they are people. Every name represents a life, and every life tells a story. The realization is unsettling. She's not sure what to do with it. Her father's task for her was clear: catalog, record, preserve. But the deeper she digs, the more she realizes that what she's doing isn't just recording the past. It's shaping the future. These names, these faces, these stories, if no one remembers them, what happens to them? They fade. They vanish into obscurity, erased by the passing of time, swallowed whole by the sweep of history. Eleanor can't let that happen. She won't let that happen. The planes overhead grow louder, a reminder that the war is still out there. But now it feels different. It feels closer. There's something at stake now, something she can't ignore. Eleanor's responsibility has always been to preserve, to archive. But suddenly, the very act of remembering feels like a rebellion. She is no longer simply writing names down. She is fighting against the erasure of the past. And in a world so consumed by destruction, maybe that's the most important fight of all. As the day drags on, Eleanor becomes more and more absorbed in her task. The rain continues to fall, the planes continue to fly overhead, but she is locked in her room, a world away from the devastation outside. With every name she writes, she feels a greater sense of urgency. History is being written in real time, and if she doesn't capture it, no one will. Her thoughts are interrupted by a knock at the door. It's her father, his face tense, his eyes distant. He doesn't need to say anything. She knows that something has changed. The war has finally reached their doorstep, and her role, her quiet task of remembering, has become something much more significant than she could have ever imagined. Eleanor, her father says, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something you need to see. She stands, her heart racing. What could be so important? What could possibly have shifted in the world outside that her father would ask her to leave her notebooks behind? She follows him out of the room, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions. As they reach the front door, he pauses and turns to her. History is no longer something we just remember, he says softly. It's something we have to fight for. The door opens, and Eleanor steps into the unknown. The planes are still there, still carving lines across the sky. But now, she sees them through different eyes. History is no longer a passive observer to the chaos. It is an active participant, shaping the events of the present. And in this moment, Eleanor understands. Her role, the one she has been trained for all her life, is far more powerful than she could have ever imagined. As she steps into the storm, she knows one thing for sure. This war is not just a battle of soldiers. It is a battle for memory itself. And she will fight with everything she has to ensure that the names, the faces, and the stories that define humanity are never forgotten. The bitter cold of a Washington winter cuts through the coat of a man who stands in front of a small, nondescript building, a building that hums with secrets. Inside, the air smells of damp paper and cigarette smoke, tinged with the sharp scent of burning midnight oil. In the heart of the capital, a quiet war is being fought, not with guns or tanks, but with the kind of intelligence that only a handful of minds have the skill to decode. Among these minds is Eleanor, the girl who remembers. Her journey to Washington had been sudden, almost strange. She hadn't been told much, just that she had to go, and that what she had to offer was valuable. The war was everywhere now, even in the most mundane corners of her life. Her father's legacy, the task of cataloging the past, was no longer a task confined to dusty shelves and faded memories. It was urgent. It was alive. And Eleanor, the quiet girl who had only ever known the weight of words, was thrust into a world where those words were the most powerful weapons of all. Eleanor steps through the door of the building and into a room that feels like the nerve center of the entire war effort. The room is packed with men and women in military uniforms, their faces drawn and tired, their eyes locked on screens, piles of documents stacked around them like the bones of some forgotten civilization. They don't look at her as she enters. She's just another cog in the machinery, a girl with a notebook. But as she crosses the threshold, she feels something in the air shift. She can feel their skepticism, their doubt, and most of all, their exhaustion. These are people who've been fighting a war for far too long, and they've learned not to trust anyone, especially not someone like her. She's not military. She's not trained to analyze intelligence or break codes. She doesn't belong here. Yet, the moment she opens her mouth and begins to speak, the room falls silent. The words spill out, words she never expected to be saying, but words that are too important to hold back. I've been looking at the patterns of names, she says, her voice steady despite the surge of nerves in her chest. There's a pattern in the way they fall. It's in the locations, the dates, and the people. The names of the soldiers, they're connected in ways you might not understand. But I do. Her words hang in the air, heavier than they should be. The room is filled with disbelief at first, the silence thick with skepticism. What could a girl, someone with no experience in military strategy or intelligence, possibly know about the patterns that the world's greatest minds have spent years trying to decipher? They have cracked codes, intercepted messages, and read the enemy's moves with razor-sharp precision. But none of them have seen what Eleanor has seen, the invisible thread connecting the faces of soldiers, their deaths, their locations, their movements. She doesn't know how she knows it, only that she does. It's as if the pieces of history are somehow more than just dots on a map. They're alive, moving, shifting, and if you know where to look, they will tell you something no one else can see. It's the kind of insight that can change the course of the war. But for now, no one listens. They dismiss her as another naive outsider, someone with nothing but curiosity and a desire to be involved. It takes days for anyone to truly hear her. Days of sitting in the corner, her notebooks filled with observations, charts, and scribbles, all of it ignored. But as the days pass, the tension in the room begins to shift. The war is not going well for the Allies. The Axis powers are tightening their grip. Desperation is growing. And then, one day it happens. A senior officer, a man with lines of age carved deep into his face, leans over Eleanor's work. He looks at her with a combination of disbelief and hope. There's something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition. "Show me," he says. It's not much, but it's enough. For the first time, someone sees the weight of what she's been trying to say. He listens to her quietly, following her as she traces the movements of soldiers across a map, her fingers brushing against names and dates like some kind of secret code. The more she talks, the more her words seem to come alive. It's as though she has unlocked something, an insight hidden in plain sight. Patterns that had once seemed meaningless, disconnected, are now coming together with a frightening clarity. Her mind races as she connects the dots, each new revelation more intense than the last. A name she recognized from the reports of a bombing, another name from a letter she had seen in her father's archive. A pattern emerges. The soldiers she's studying are not just victims of war. They're pawns in a larger game, manipulated by an enemy that understands the power of memory and its ability to control the future. The senior officer listens intently, his eyes narrowing as he begins to understand. This is no longer just about history. It's about the future, and Eleanor's ability to remember, to connect seemingly unrelated facts, has the potential to change the outcome of the war. She may not be trained in the art of war, but she's trained in something far more important, the art of remembering, the art of seeing what others can't. For days, Eleanor works with the officer, mapping out the enemy's movements, uncovering hidden alliances, and identifying patterns that no one else had seen. She uncovers intelligence that others have missed, that no codebreaker could have deciphered. And with every new discovery, the team of analysts and officers who once dismissed her begin to look at her differently. She is no longer the outsider, the girl who simply remembers. She is a weapon forged from the forgotten pieces of the past. Her work doesn't stop there. As the months go by, Eleanor becomes an integral part of the intelligence team. Her notebooks, once dismissed as the ramblings of a curious girl, are now vital documents in the war effort. The faces and names she records are no longer just a collection of stories. They are the key to unraveling the enemy's strategies, their plans, their movements. Yet, even as she becomes more involved in the war effort, Eleanor remains an outsider. She's still the girl who wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't trained to be a strategist. She wasn't trained to fight. She wasn't trained to break codes or analyze intelligence. She was trained to remember. But that simple task, remembering, has turned out to be the most powerful weapon she could wield. And as the war intensifies, as the stakes rise higher than ever before, Eleanor begins to understand the depth of her role. She's not just preserving the past. She is shaping the future. The war is no longer about soldiers on the battlefield or diplomats in ivory towers. It's about memory. It's about who remembers and who gets forgotten. And Eleanor, the girl who was never meant to fight, has become the last line of defense in a world at war. In the quiet moments, when she sits alone in her room, Eleanor sometimes wonders how she came to be in this position. She's not a hero. She's not a soldier. She's just a girl with a mind for memory, a mind for connecting the dots. And yet, it's her mind, her ability to see patterns others can't, that is changing the course of the war. As the war rages on, Eleanor is no longer just an observer of history. She is a participant in a war that is being fought not with guns and bombs, but with the power of memory and the ability to make history come alive again. And as the days stretch on, Eleanor knows this. The story she has been telling, the story she has been writing down, one name at a time, has never been just about the past. It has always been about the future. The city is a mixture of celebration and quiet devastation. The war has ended, the bloodshed paused, and victory hangs in the air like a scent so sweet it almost hurts to breathe. There are parades, there are cheers, but in the midst of the jubilation, there is also a silence that is often louder than any shout of triumph. Eleanor stands in the streets of Paris, the city now teeming with life, but in her heart, there's a knot, a sense of being out of place amidst the roaring celebrations. She had not fought in the trenches. She had not worn the uniform. She had not fired the shots that ended the war. She had only remembered what others wanted to forget. As she walks through the crowded boulevards, her mind drifts back to the days spent hunched over maps and notebooks, to the hours when no one believed in her work. At the time, she was just a girl with an uncanny ability to notice patterns, to see what others couldn't. She never thought much of it. It was just her job, just something she did to honor the dead, to preserve the pieces of history that would otherwise vanish like dust in the wind. But as the war dragged on, and her work grew more crucial, Eleanor began to realize that what she was doing was not just preserving history. It was shaping the very future of the war. But now, with the war over, she wonders if it was enough. All her work, all the names, the faces, the connections she had painstakingly uncovered, had they truly made a difference? In the frenzy of the victory, the glory, and the medals, what was left of the quiet victories, of those who had fought not with weapons, but with memory?